How's it going, you guys? So in this video I want to talk a little bit about longevity and human health and the variety of diets that you could probably follow to actually achieve that. So obviously I'm probably sipping on some yerba mate. For those of you who have been following me for a while, probably already should expect that from whatever's in my mug is usually mate, although sometimes I'll be drinking morning coffee while I make these videos. So, eating for longevity and human health. So obviously, the first thing that we should be asking ourselves when we're talking about this topic is what exactly is our definition of health in the first place? So, and also longevity. So, I actually kind of more so want to talk about health span in this video because I think longevity is a very complicated topic, living into your years of 120 years old and stuff like that. That's something that I've studied extensively. But I think what people should be focused mostly on is avoiding most of the diseases that kill people off before they hit the age of 80, staying away from pharmaceutical drugs, and basically living as healthy and as energetic and as youthful as you possibly can for as long as humanly possible, while at the same time eating certain types of foods that will, give your greatest chance towards living into your more advanced years, like 100 years old, 120, etc. So, there's a wide variety of sources that you could tap into when we're talking about this topic. Gotta love those planes, you guys. I'm sure you could hear me despite the plane noise. So we could look to the blue zones, and that's where most people look when we're thinking about longevity and longevity diets and stuff like that. We look towards the blue zones. So there's a couple things that we gotta think about first when we talk about blue zones. The first thing is that a lot of the nutrition recommendations based on blue zones are missing key points that are very important. So, for example, the Okinawan longevity diet of mostly sweet potatoes, caloric restriction, and stuff like that. That's actually a bastardized version of a diet that Okinawans were forced to follow when enemy soldiers were occupying their island. And so the 1940s, there were multiple wars that reigned through, Japan and Okinawa. And it was really, really bad. It was horrifying wars in the 1940s on the Okinawan island. I was reading a quote the other day, coincidentally. It wasn't even a quote from a longevity source or talking about nutrition, but they were talking about how the Japanese soldiers used Okinawan soldiers as human shields against enemy forces. And that's just terrifying. So in the 1940s, there was warfare that was going through Japan and the Okinawan Islands, and basically their food supply was severely compromised due to these wars. There were famines and things of that nature that forced these people, the natives of Okinawa, to be consuming a calorically restricted diet. And so this idea that caloric restriction promotes longevity, especially if we base that on the Okinawan Islands, is missing a huge chunk of vitally important information, and that is the fact that they had to restrict calories, not by choice, but because they weren't actively restricting calories. They're eating super low calories because they didn't have enough food to go around because the war had ruined their food supply. Traditionally, these people actually ate a large amount of pork and more so fish. And you got to be kind of stupid to think that the Okinawans would not be eating fish, considering they're living on an island surrounded by fish. And Japan as a whole is known for their culture of fishing. So the food collection data was taken from that time period in 1940s. And that's used to base the entire longevity diet of Okinawa, and it's foolish. If you've ever tried restricting calories for a prolonged period of time, especially to that extent that the Okinawans were claimed to have been doing, you would feel like absolute garbage, okay? Anyway, they were eating lard, they were eating pork, they were eating fish. And I actually know quite a few people. I actually trained karate under an Okinawan, actually 3 Okinawan masters who either lived on the Okinawan Islands, they're born there actually, or their parents actually lived through in the 1940s and experienced that for themselves, and they can attest to the dietary changes themselves. And I also actually met, but didn't know personally, a couple people who served in a war where they were stationed in Okinawa. Of course, that was years ago that I talked to these people. And so anyway, point is, the longevity diets of Okinawa and a lot of these people are completely just taken out of context, just completely messed up. The other thing is, and this is also something that was done by Ansel Keys, taking data from Mediterranean islands during Lent, for example. During Lent, they're going to be eating less animal products because that's what Lent is for, based on religious reasons, not because they traditionally ate less animal products as their normal part of their diet. And so, this type of food questionnaire type of thing where they, take data from a certain time period where they restrict certain foods to fit their bias. I mean, this is actually very, very common. Not to mention the fact that most of these, most of these centenarians, including Okinawa, but the other blue zones, the people of Crete, pretty much every single blue zone except for the Seventh-day Adventists, animal products nose to tail. So they did eat animal products, they did eat organ meats, they did eat a large amount of animal fats, or just fats in general, and a lot of times high monounsaturated fats, which I've talked about many times before. Now, the fat content of the pork that they were eating might actually be more saturated than monounsaturated, because you got to remember the livestock and the pork that we eat here in America, where we can actually test the fat content with scientific analysis, are generally fed corn, soy, and grains, which can artificially increase the amount of monounsaturated fat in the end product. Whereas the types of pigs that the Okinawans are probably eating, most likely were eating grass, they're probably eating worms and bugs, and I mean, pigs are even known to eat meat, and that can change the color of their meat to red, believe it or not, and can obviously change their fat content as well. So for all we know, the lard that these people were eating could have been higher in saturated fat, but we don't know for sure. Now, obviously, they were eating a large amount of plant foods and things like that, and the sweet potatoes on Okinawa were definitely a staple. And pretty much every single blue zone that that we have nutrition data calculated for, these people were eating a large amount of plant foods. So anytime you hear people say that plant foods are going to kill you without context, such as food intolerances, Crohn's disease, irritable bowel syndrome, and stuff like that, you definitely got to question. You got to question their integrity. It doesn't make so much sense considering the longest living people in the world ate a large amount of plant foods. And I personally am not an advocate of eating super low energy dense foods like broccoli and kale, which we can hardly even digest as humans. It doesn't really make sense, especially when we think in terms of the optimal foraging strategy theory, which is something a lot of people probably don't even know what it is. But basically, human beings in all cultures generally sought out the largest amount of calorie density they could for the least amount of effort. And that's part of the reason why obesity is such an epidemic these days, because of the energy density with low nutrient density and the low amount of effort that it takes to actually get these foods. But other commonalities, though, between these people, a lot of them ate a large amount of seafood. The Mediterranean countries were near a huge body of water. The Japanese, the Okinawans, Costa Rica. Also, coffee was a really huge commonality. As I pour my yerba mate, coffee was a really huge characteristic in these people as well. You know, and obviously in Okinawa it is more so tea, but especially in the Mediterranean and Costa Rica as well, they're a huge coffee producing region. Especially the generation from the 1900s, you know, 1800s and 1900s, drink a lot of coffee in the majority of these people. And so, not only coffee, but alcohol as well. And, you know, it's interesting thinking about that, considering the fact that, you know, I actually am part of a no caffeine group on Facebook, where I'm constantly seeing people posting articles and scientific references talking about the potential dangers of coffee and caffeine on human health and longevity. People saying it increases cortisol, shortens telomeres, and all these things, which is fascinating considering there's a lot of data showing that polyphenols in coffee can actually increase telomere length, which is a indication of longevity. But fact is, Costa Rica, the people of the Mediterranean, and a wide range of long-living, healthy cultures drink coffee, and generally large amounts of coffee, up to 8 cups a day on average. I personally don't drink coffee because I feel like it ruins my dental health in an abnormal way that I don't think is applicable to the average population. I like tea though, but again, it goes to show that, you know, people who diss coffee and say that it is terrible for human health or caffeinated beverages in general, you know, it's kind of hard to believe in that when the longest living and healthiest cultures tend to drink a lot of coffee and tea as well, which tea is completely different from coffee in my opinion. But also alcohol, you know, for example, the people of the Mediterranean, they drink wine as if it was water. The people of Okinawa, now I don't know if this was only during the war or if this was always, but they drink sake, you know, on a daily basis. And I've heard many different, you know, there's a wide variety of types of evidence that points towards alcohol as a health-promoting beverage. Now, obviously, now I don't even drink alcohol, so this is not me looking for a reason to drink alcohol, because I actually don't think I've even had an alcoholic beverage at all this year, at all. And last time I drank alcohol, I think it was wine with my mother, in June 2019. So, and I've never really been a huge alcohol drinker. There was a period of time, I think in 2017, where I was drinking wine more often, and I just started drinking alcohol at the time. And it was just wine. I don't think I've ever been drunk ever. There's a time where I drank a whole bottle of wine. I thought I was drunk, but my girlfriend at the time, who happened to be a bartender, told me I definitely wasn't drunk, but I thought I was. So, you know, I'm not looking for confirmation bias here, but the fact of the matter is, it is a common trait amongst longevity cultures. Now, and the other thing is, if you look at some of these things, and you also look at centenarians and supercentenarians, who are kind of like isolated and they're not part of like a blue zone, you know, and you look at what was that guy, Ovington or whatever? He was like a war veteran, African American man who lived to be like 120. He talked about how he would wake up in the middle of the night and drink coffee. And if he woke up, he would just get up. Like, the guy didn't even, you know, have the best sleep patterns. And he would drink coffee in the middle of the night, but he drank a lot of coffee. He drank ice cream. Now, a lot of people will say he's an exception, but I think, again, that's a testament to, you know, the possibility that we have sleep wrong. I've talked about this many times before. We have evidence associating people who sleep 8 hours a night tend to be healthier than people who sleep more or less. But people who are sleep deprived are typically people who are working hardcore, you know, unhealthy working shifts, shift work and stuff like that, chronically stressed, drinking a shit ton of caffeine and energy drinks to stay awake. You know, we got to remember, people who people who eat more red meat, people who sleep more, people who do this or that, and correlation studies, doesn't really mean that sleep is the causative factor, or, it's a association. People who do this or that typically live a similar lifestyle, and it might not be the factor that is being associated. So, point here though is that, so I'm going off on a tangent here, but, sleep, we might not know everything about sleep. I mean, we really don't. We don't even know what the purpose of sleep is or why we do it. We just have theories. There's so that guy, that centenarian, whatever his name is, Mr. Overton or whatever, he only slept like 4 to 5 hours a night. Drank coffee in the middle of the night. Lots of these centenarians talk about drinking coffee. A lot of them talk about drinking alcohol. Some of them talk about smoking cigarettes until they die. Now, I don't think that that's a good longevity strategy, and I don't recommend any of that. But I think especially in regards to alcohol, I think in regards to coffee, I think that there's a lot that we need to look at in those aspects. I think this idea of hormesis, building a stronger organism, is probably the closest thing we have. I think it's probably the strongest longevity strategy we have is this idea of hormesis. Because there's a lot of molecules in coffee that can promote hormesis. I think caffeine on its own might have a hormetic effect. Obviously caffeine directly increases cortisol and adrenaline, which are stress hormones. And we know that hormesis is putting the body under a certain amount of stress. The body learns to adapt and it gets stronger as a result. So drinking coffee kind of gives your body a workout in a way. It gives your stress hormones a workout, is kind of the way I see it. And I believe, I've drank all different types of caffeine, experimented for long periods of time, and with different dosages. And what I've found is a moderate dose, or a small to moderate dose of caffeine, especially from natural sources, taken in a very intelligent way, seems to boost my own well-being and health in a way that larger doses for like pre-workout purposes and things definitely don't. And I've heard a lot of different people talk about how they believe alcohol is a key to longevity. I've heard a lot of people talk about alcohol being their health tonic, but they usually say a shot a day keeps the doctor away. Generally, it's something like whiskey or scotch or something before they go to bed. I know one strength coach named Phil DeRue who trains an American Top Team, professional UFC fighters and professional athletes of all types. And in his day of eating video, he finished off his day with a shot of Jack. Not to say that means it's healthy or anything, but I just find that fascinating. So, this has kind of just been like a sporadic talk here while I drink I guess I can call this TeaTalk. The main point here is that plant foods definitely don't kill people, but if you have Crohn's disease, if you have an intestinal disorder, constipation, things like that, you probably need to take a look at the way you eat plant foods. But, the longest living people in the world definitely didn't hurt them. And they're probably eating different types of plant foods, didn't have the same kind of pesticides and things sprayed on them, genetic modifications, they're grown locally in their own gardens, stuff like that, which probably plays a huge role. Probably weren't hybridized and sprayed with hormones like bananas and stuff are at grocery stores, shipped all the way across the world, which probably changes some of their chemical composition and their digestibility. That might all be a factor. They also tend to eat animal products, and a lot of the data on these people was taken from certain times that biases a lot of the information. They drank alcohol as a regular part of the routine. They drank caffeine and coffee and stuff like that. And some people, like Mr. Overton, would wake up in the middle of the night and drink coffee. So, You know, overall, I think it's important to avoid things that make you sick, do things that make you feel good, and definitely avoid the foods that we're pretty sure cause disease. I would say pretty much any processed food and vegetable oils, I think, are huge. Um, and then also, if you're talking about fat content, you gotta, if you consider vegetable oils unhealthy, you also gotta consider high linoleic acid animal products like conventionally raised chicken and even pork to some extent probably has way too much omega-6, which could possibly affect lipid peroxidation and heart health, similarly, and inflammation as well, similarly to the way vegetable oils do. And these traditional cultures, if they ate animal products, they were fed in a way that lowers the linoleic acid content. So, with all that being said, I'll probably make a shorter video to summarize this stuff. And I'll talk to y'all very soon. Leave your comments down below. Let me know, what did you get out of this talk? Later.